Dear participants, a very warm welcome to today's webinar, Global Water Bankruptcy, Understanding the Impacts and the Way Forward for Shaping Regional Resilience and Sustainability in Asia and the Pacific. My name is Divasha Naraswati, and I'm an intern at ADBI. Together with my colleague, Samantha Duremdes, I'm very pleased to help guide you through today's program. A quick disclaimer upon joining this webinar. This event may be photographed, live streamed, or recorded. By participating, attendees consent to the use of their name, likeness, voice, and any comments or presentations in any media for institute-related purposes, without compensation or further permission. Allow me to briefly introduce the agenda for this webinar. We will begin with opening remarks before moving into the main sessions. In the first session, Professor Kabe Madani will deliver a presentation on understanding water bankruptcy, followed by a 10-minute Q&A session. In the second session, Dr. Norio Saito will present on the Asian Water Development Outlook, which will then be followed by an open forum discussion chaired by Dr. K.E. Sitaram. Before we begin our first session, we know that it's an early morning for our participants in Asia. To help wake us up a bit and to get a quick sense of where everyone is starting from, we'd like to launch a short pulse survey using a couple of quick polls. Let's try the first poll. Water bankruptcy is a concept that was introduced in the recent UNEU report. Before reading the report or joining today's webinar, how familiar were you with this concept? Did you perhaps have an oh realization moment before you first encountered this term? Wow, the results are coming in. It seems like it's very divided. Mhm. Great. We'll share the results. So, around 40% of the attendees said that they've heard of this term but did not know much about it. Oh, and 15% said that they were very familiar, and 31 said that they were somewhat familiar, and 15 said they were not familiar at all. Those are very interesting results, and it seems that a lot of our participants does not know much about it or were not familiar at all, meaning that I think that this webinar will be a very helpful insight for all of the attendees today. Okay, next, let's move on to our second poll. Let's talk about your own country. So, when you think about your own country or community, how serious does water-related stress feel right now? Do you think it's very serious, slightly serious, or maybe not so serious at all? Great. So we have the results in. Wow. So 30% have said that it is extremely serious. Hmm. I wonder where our attendees are coming. Biggest one is 43% says that it's moderately serious, while one of the participants said that it's not serious. Wow. These are very interesting results that just show how important water bankruptcy is going to as an important topic. Hmm. Very interesting. Okay, let's move on to the third poll. So now that we recognize that it is a serious issue, Do you think your country is prepared to cope with this worsening water stress? Do you think they're very prepared or perhaps not prepared at all? Hmm. Wow, there are very varying results. Okay, so our results are in. Let's share them. Oh, so most of our participants say that they're not very prepared, somewhat prepared, and not prepared at all. Wow. I guess through this webinar, we will learn about what are the different methods of mitigation and how we can prepare for this. Now we'll have our last poll. So now let's think further about the underlying causes. What do you see as a single biggest driver for growing water insecurity? Perhaps do you think that it's climate change, poor governance, or maybe an underinvestment in water infrastructure? I'm sure different countries and might have some different perspectives. Hmm. Wow, it seems like one of these options are very popular. Okay, we have our results. So, most of our participants think that poor governance and weak regulation is the primary driver. That's very interesting. And some people think that it's climate change, population growth, oh, and underinvestment in water infrastructure. Wow, there's a diverse of answers here. But I think no matter what the answer is, we'll learn a lot of perspective from today's webinar on how we can solve these issues. Thank you very much for participating in our polls. We learned a lot from the results and your perspectives. You want to launch the phrase. Okay. Let's try to now that a lot of more attendees are coming in, let's try to relaunch one of our first polls just so we can get a better grasp of the situation here. Okay, so let's reread again our first poll that water bankruptcy is a concept that was introduced in the recent UNE report. Before reading the report or joining today's webinar, how familiar with you with this concept? Now we have more results. Hey, it seems that we have similar results now that more participants are coming in, and majority still says that they've heard of this term but do not know much more about it. Well, that's good for us to hear so that we're able to provide you for new insights from this webinar. Hey, it seems like we have a wide variety of panelists today. Oh, some coming from different backgrounds. Okay, so to begin our program, it is my pleasure to invite Dean Bambang Brojonegoro, Dean of ADBI, to deliver his opening remarks.
Thank you very much, and very good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on the global water bankruptcy, understanding the impacts and the way forward for shaping regional resilience and sustainability in Asia and the Pacific. It is a pleasure to have you join us virtually, and I truly appreciate your commitment to this important discussion. I'm delighted to extend a warm welcome and sincere thanks to our distinguished guest speaker, Dr. Kafeh Madani. Dr. Madani is an internationally recognized environmental scientist and policy expert, currently serving as director of the United Nations University Institute for Water, Environment, and Health, and recently named the 2026 Stockholm Water Prize laureate. His work on water resources management, environmental governance, and the concept of global water scarcity provides a vital foundation for today's discussion. We are also pleased to welcome Dr. Norio Saito, Senior Director of Water and Urban Development Sector Office at the Asian Development Bank. He leads and oversees sector operations that support livable cities, water security, the circular economy, and urban resilience across all regions where ADB operates. Today, he will share key messages from Asian Water Development Outlook 2025, highlighting regional water security trends, major vulnerabilities, and priority actions for strengthening resilience and governance. Across the world, water systems are under unprecedented pressure, threatening not only environmental stability, but also human security, economic development, and social cohesion. Water underpins food and energy production, public health, livelihoods, and peace. Yet, billions of people still lack safely managed drinking water and sanitation, and severe water scarcity affects large portion of global population. These realities signal that water-related risks are no longer isolated challenges, but systemic constraint on sustainable development. For decades, global discourse has framed these challenges as water crisis, implying temporary shocks that can be resolved through mitigation and recovery. However, emerging evidence suggests a more profound shift. In many regions, long-term overuse, pollution, and ecosystem degradation have pushed water systems beyond their capacity to recover, creating what is now described as a state of global water bankruptcy, a post-crisis condition in which withdrawals exceed renewable supplies and irreversible damage undermines future water availability and ecosystem function. In this context, water governance must evolve beyond short-term crisis management toward transformative approaches that rebalance demand, protect natural capital, and support just and inclusive transition for affected communities. Managing water bankruptcy requires combining mitigation with adaptation, strengthening institutions, and aligning development pathways with the hydrological realities. In NDBI, we are now conducting the so-called flagship study on shaping Asia's future prosperity with quality growth. And the part of quality growth that we would like to emphasize is the importance of water and sanitation, not only so-called as infrastructure, but more importantly as a basic needs for majority of population in Asia. And we have to also accept the condition that majority of middle income Asia still far behind when it comes to the fulfillment of the needs of basic drinking water, especially, and also a proper sanitation, including how to manage, for example, wastewater management. So I think today's webinar responds directly to this urgent global challenge. It brings together evidence, policy insights, and practical perspective to explore how governments, institutions, and societies can navigate the era of water bankruptcy while safeguarding equity, resilience, and long-term sustainability. I encourage everyone to engage actively in the discussion, share experiences, and reflect on how this insight can inform policy and action in your own context. Together, let's use this dialogue to move from awareness to meaningful transformation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dean Bongbong, for your wonderful opening remarks. We will now move on to our first session. Please join me in warmly welcoming Professor Kaveh Madani, Director of the United Nations University Institute for Water, Environment, and Health, and a 2026 Stockholm Water Prize laureate, as he shares his insights on water bankruptcy. Over to you.
Thank you very much for the kind invitation. Greetings from Canada, Toronto, Canada. It's great to be talking to you, and thank you for the invitation. As you know, especially for those who are connecting from Japan, we are part of the United Nations University system. The Institute for Water, Environment, and Health is supported and hosted by the Government of Canada, and I should acknowledge their support for our activities throughout the last 3 decades, because this year is our 30th anniversary, and this report was released at the beginning of this year. As you might have heard about it in the news, it has made a lot of noise, and has generated a lot of interest about the term. But as you would hear from me today, the water bankruptcy concept is beyond just a simple metaphor or another cool term to talk about water scarcity. It has a particular meaning and major implications for the policy world. And I hope after this talk and after reading the report, you would be all good messengers of water bankruptcy, not to disappoint the world, but to encourage them to take action. If you look at the report, and please don't do that before sleep time and bed, read it in the morning. There are a lot of striking numbers and statistics about what the world looks like today when it comes to access to water. Still, billions of people don't have access to water in many areas of the world. People are living in water insecure areas. Surface water systems are shrinking, wetlands drying up, rivers shrinking, and our reservoirs are now emptier than what we plan in many parts of the world. Groundwater depletion continues in many parts of the world. Land subsidence is one of the results of that. Sinkholes, as you see in the photo on the right side, this is a sinkhole in Turkey. And recently it was in the news that there were 700 of these big sinkholes in one area in Turkey because of groundwater pumping for agriculture. So we are also seeing our glaciers are melting. We are losing our all the savings that we have. We are liquidating. It's kind of the future resources or the assets are being liquidated to be used today for our survival. Yet this is not enough. Many agricultural areas, food baskets of the world are being threatened. There are major risks of water shortage. The problems are not only the water system, but also the ecosystem and the natural assets that are dependent and are connected to the water system and shape our water capital. Land and soil degradation continues. Salinization of soil is threatening agricultural productivity and water resources in many different parts of the world. In many places like Asia Pacific, some Asia Pacific countries, water might be abundant in quantity in some places, but the quality is very low, and its water might not be usable even if it's available in terms of quantity. So in some places, what we see is that signs of problems that are chronic, things that are not going away, even in years that are wet. We get more than average rainfall. Still, our conditions don't go away. As soon as there is the first drought, a normal year, our reservoirs shrink, and we are facing major problems. In recent years, You have heard about a lot of cities being close to their zero: Kabul, Tehran, Cape Town, Chennai, Sao Paulo, now Johannesburg. Like, a lot of places are experiencing that situation that even taps can go dry and people might have access. The report has one important message, and that is that the problems we are facing are simply growing. They're not getting any better while we are sticking to an outdated agenda that we developed long time ago, and we really don't have any plan to do anything about what is happening. And now the report calls this situation the situation of water bankruptcy with some very important messages. As you can guess, bankruptcy, water bankruptcy, just like financial bankruptcy, is about the mismatch of income and expenditure, supply and use, water supply and water use. But what constitutes our water supply or water assets is our checking account plus our savings account. So our checking account is the surface water systems, the reservoirs that we built, the wetlands, the rivers, and all those things that are renewed or recharged by nature every year. We also have some assets that are long-term assets and savings account, aquifers and glaciers, for example. What we see around the world is that in many places, these two accounts have shrunk or have been exhausted. It would have been okay if in the dry years we would have used some of our savings, and in the wet years we would have recharged it. So that's the sustainable use of resources. But what has happened is that we drain our checking account, and then we went and exhausted our savings account. So that forms a situation of insolvency, where for an extended period, the expenses are bigger than income. But water bankruptcy does not happen only because of insolvency. The report says that, or the concept that I have developed is saying that bankruptcy emerges when insolvency is combined with irreversibility. And that is a situation we are seeing in many parts of the world. These ecosystem components, these components of the saving and the water system or water assets are getting into a chronic mode or facing chronic problems and lose their ability to bounce back to where they were. So in a way, while we call them a crisis, we believe or imply that this is a situation that might be reversible. Some of these damages are completely irreversible in reasonable human time frame. Why? Because we might not know how to fix it, like extinct species or biodiversity loss as a result of water shortage or land subsidence. It's very hard, or at least we don't know the scientific solution for that, or it's politically and socioeconomically very hard. Like you cannot really remove a very big reservoir or ask people to move out of a city because you want to recreate a wetland or restore the wetland. What we see is our use continues to grow. We had agricultural use, urban use, domestic water use, industrial use, and now we are seeing data centers, AI, and our expenditure essentially continues to rise despite the fact that our system, our assets are shrinking, are being exhausted. And climate change is a catalyst of this process. It's making the situation even worse. What we see around the world is water use continuing to increase, population growth, development, more food production, as you see on the right. There's food production that continues to grow, agriculture continues to grow, water use continues to grow. We need to feed the world, we need to energize the world, we need to electrify the world, we need to provide to the world, and water is an underlying asset. And temperature is rising. Water availability is changing in different parts of the world. Some parts of the world are becoming wetter but the quantity and timing of flows are changing. In some places, we don't get snow as much as before, and we get more rainfall, and that is changing or disrupting the settings that we have had based on which we plan our infrastructure. We build our cities, we build our levees, we built our reservoirs, we made agreements, treaties, we developed water governance frameworks and allocated rights. But right now, or in many places, there is not much water left in the system, and what we planned based on, which was the historical condition, is no longer there. Now the question is this situation temporary, or it's going to be lasting or not? Now, water bankruptcy, what the report says is that it doesn't, that it first of all, it appears anywhere that people are living. So bankruptcy, just like financial bankruptcy, water bankruptcy is not about how rich or poor you are to begin with. It's about how you manage your assets. It's about your business model. If your business model is wrong, even if you're a water-rich country, you would face a problem, either through quantity loss or quality loss. Top left, Chennai, India, day zero, we have seen it. Top right, Tibet, the glaciers in the Tibet, China, we are seeing them being lost. The glaciers are actually the natural assets underlying the water system. Bottom left, Lake Mead behind Hoover Dam, the biggest reservoir in the United States, a dam that inspired dam building around the world, inspired many world leaders to build dams and move on. Next to it is a lake in a wetland in India, suffering from pollution. As I said, in some places we have water, but it's toxic. It's toxic acid. It's polluted. We can't use it. Next to it, it's Australia, soil degradation and salinization. Next to it is Lake Urumia in northwest Iran that has dried up, similar to the Aral Sea, similar to the Dead Sea, similar to the Great Salt Lakes in the United States. These are problems that are repeating themselves around the world. And bottom right, another damage to land and sinkholes because of subsidence actually and groundwater use in Turkey. Now, the question is whether we are dealing with simply a water crisis episode, or this is beyond that. The report tries to get your attention, and there is a report and an underlying paper actually published in Water Resources Management this year on January 19th, and the report was released on January 20th. So the paper is telling us that, listen, we have to philosophically challenge the term crisis, because crisis is something temporary. It's a shock. It means to be temporary. It's a temporary deviation from normal, where when we focus on mitigation. So if we just call all these problems around the world, all these manifestations and symptoms of water problems around the world as a crisis, are we suggesting that we are going to go back with the first rainfall, or with a little bit of change of things? No, because in a lot of places, even if we change our management model right now, right away, because it's not raining as before, or because some of the damages are irreversible, we are not going to go back. The report says that this situation is a situation of failure. It's a situation of bankruptcy. It's a post-crisis state, because no longer mitigation would be sufficient, because we cannot really push the system back to where it was. What you thought is abnormal is actually our new normal. The situation is no longer a temporary crisis. It is something we have to live with. Now we have a choice to make. Either deny it, assume that we go back to where it was, assume that we can solve it, imply to the stakeholders, to the decision makers, to all those people out there, to the public, that this is just temporary. It's a drought. It's something natural. It's something climate related. It's something that is temporary, and things are going to go back. Or admits that it is a failure. It's a situation of a failure. Why is it good to do that? Bankruptcy is not a sweet thing. It's bitter. It is a sad thing in a way. It's an admission to a failure if you claim bankruptcy, and that requires a lot of courage to do that. But why would you do that? Because the moment you do that, you have hope and belief that maybe like you can enable the future. You want to prevent further losses, further irreversible damages to the system, mitigate what can be mitigated, fix what can be fixed, and prevent further damages, and then live with what you can't fix anymore. Because in addition to mitigation, you need to adapt to a new reality, which is sad, which is more restricted. But if you don't do that, the future would be even more restricted because we are going to make more and more damages to the system. And that's something we want to avoid by doing so. So yes, it's sad, it looks ugly, but it's better to say that we are in this trouble together to be able to address it. And understand the manifestations are different. In one place, it appears as groundwater drawdown, and another place as pollution, at another place as sand and dust storms, and another place as biodiversity loss and wildfire. It's showing itself to us in different ways. And what matters in this process, and what the report says, is you have to understand that water is connected to a machinery, one machinery that produces water. All, the wetlands, the glaciers, all these things that are connected, soil, land, everything, and the climate system, the hydrological cycle. We have planned for water as it is a good or a service to be allocated or delivered. We have set up treaties based on that mentality. We have set up institutions and management institutions based on that mentality and perception. But how can you manage a product of a bigger process if you let that process be disrupted, right? How can you let the climate system be disrupted, the hydrological system be disrupted? Upstream, you have like land use changes, you have deforestation happening upstream, lots of interference upstream within your nation or your neighboring nation in a transboundary system, or even through atmospheric system. It doesn't need to be always a transboundary system. What happens upstream in another country can affect us. If we allow that machinery to be disrupted, then water system would be disrupted as well. So we cannot really protect and manage water if we ignore that underlying machinery. And what the report makes clear here is that yes, climate system is something that the water system depends on. Water relies on climate. Climate change affects water system, but the water system also affects climate, because water is also upstream of the climate system. If the wetland dries up, then the microclimate would be impacted. So this is something extremely important, because the report concludes with something extremely, I would say, positive. In a world that is very fragmented, we are suffering from conflicts. We don't want to engage in multilateralism. But water is one of those things that is very unique in the fact that we can all agree to its importance, no matter if you're left or right, if you're a global south or global north. Water matters. If you think your country should be first and national security matters to you, water should matter to you. If you want to do all productions at home, water should matter to you. If you're thinking about importing food from another place, water should matter to you. If you're thinking about the employment of the farmers and the rural communities, water matters to you. And it's an important thing. And this common denominator can give us a chance to align our national priorities with international priorities. Water can be the medium of delivery on the big goals that we have on fulfilling justice, human rights, equity, peace, poverty alleviation, and so on. And the difference is that when you make a dollar, like an investment of $1 in the water sector, the impact is much more tangible and immediate, and it touches the poor of the world. 70% of the world's water is in the good hands of farmers, mostly in the poor economies of the world. Many of these people are subsistence farmers. They farm to live and water shortage or water bankruptcy to them is loss of employment, it's starvation, it's forced displacement, it's forced migration, it's tension, conflicts, and so on. And if you don't address this issue, based on because the policies that we have in place, the agenda we have in place is very theoretical. Integrated water resources management, yes, we have been talking about that for the last 3-4 decades, but how do we do that? Remove subsidies. How can I remove subsidies in a global south country if the global north countries are afraid of imposing taxes on carbon and many other things? It's impossible. And the report says, but here is the opportunity. What if you think about climate change, the Rio Conventions, biodiversity loss, desertification, water is the medium of delivery. There is nothing you do about water that doesn't help the climate change fight. There is no activity in the world that is dry and doesn't require water. So if that dependence is there and we all agree to it, let's take an action on it. And this year is the year of water, and we can do things.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Madani, for that very insightful presentation. I felt like that was very impactful. We will now open the floor for the Q&A session. To begin, we will invite questions or comments from Professor Michael Hanneman from Arizona State University, Dean Bangbang, and Dr. Norio Saito from ADB. If time permits, we will be happy to take questions from the broader audience. We encourage you to interact with our speaker. To ask a question, kindly raise your hand during the Q&A, and the moderator will activate the unmute feature for you. You may also use the Q&A feature or the chat box to send your questions. First, we will invite Professor Michael Hanneman, Dean Bangbang, or Dr. Norio Saito for their comments and questions.
Let me make a brief comment. By chance, I was lecturing today in my course on the Colorado River. So America is a rich country, a well-developed country. We started, the use of Colorado River water started in 1890. So for 130 years, we've been using the water. We reached an agreement among the 7 states in 1922. The agreement in 1922 allocated more water than exists in the river. Mm-hmm. And we face a governance challenge of how to revise that agreement. There was a deadline, existing agreements expired at the end of this year, December 31st. There was a deadline for reaching a new agreement. How the river was being allocated, that framework expires at the end of this year. There was a deadline for finding a new agreement in February that passed, no agreement. And so here we are, a wealthy country, a long history of institutions, and we are able to adapt to this change. And it turned out for the 20th century, the amount of stream flow in the river matched the amount of water use. But what has happened since 2000 is the water use has fallen by, the stream flow has fallen by something like 18%, and the water use has stayed the same. And so the Colorado River literally is an example of bankruptcy. In a rich country where the water users look at their own interests and are unable to deal with it. That's a sign of the seriousness of the problem. And the last thing I'll say is, for most of the time, the federal government, which runs the system, stayed out of the debate. It left the states to work things out among themselves. And the whole point is that has failed. And we now need the federal government to step in. It's like an adult dealing with squabbling children. But the governance failure in the United States is massive. And so other countries which struggle with governance, should realize this is not an embarrassment for them. It's a problem in so many areas that rely on water. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I react, or how does it work? Yeah, and if I may, yes. I mean, this is why the report has many examples from different parts of the world, developing and developed, global south and global north, because the issue of water use and water bankruptcy is not the issue of global south and north. It's the issue. It's not about the richness of water or poorness of water, but it's not about how financially rich or poor you are. It's about the business model. And then, of course, there are historical reasons. Colorado, the treaty there was based on the amount of water that didn't exist, or at least throughout throughout history has changed. This is the problem we are seeing in many parts of the world, and conditions of the world are non-stationary. So Colorado River system is just an example. You go to California's Central Valley, you see the same thing. You go to Ogallala Aquifer, you see the same thing. You go to different places, the same mechanisms and dynamics are there. And I mean, in Canada, we're in a city close to us, Waterloo. Too much permitting has resulted in issues. So housing permits at some point had to be stopped or rethought. You would go to Alberta, lots of water, lots of agriculture, energy development, and so on, and urbanization, and water is becoming an issue. And indeed, this is not the issue of the Middle East and North Africa that are dry. This is not the issue of even the drier part of the United States. It's a problem that we see around the world, and we have to do something about it. And the message is very clear. We're not going to be able to solve it through the existing institutions, even if we see this sort of a deadline for reaching an agreement. We already saw it in the case of water transfer from San Joaquin and Sacramento Valley, from Sacramento and San Joaquin Delta in Northern California to Southern California. Same model. CalFed failed because we couldn't, and the stakeholders couldn't reach an agreement. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for that amazing remarks. Now we will invite Dr. Norio Saito to make his comments and questions.
Great, thank you. Very briefly in the interest of time, but thank you so much to Dr. Madani for the excellent presentation. And this is really a great analytical work with very strong messages and warning to the world, which is very appropriate. In terms of the messages, actually, this is very closely aligned with ADB's Asian Water Development Outlook, which I'm going to present in a minute. Our EUDO 2025 also acknowledges the great progress made in many of the developing countries in the last decade. More people have better access to water and sanitation. People are safer from floods. So that part has been acknowledged in our report. But actually, in terms of the messages, we need to enhance governance. We need to address environmental degradations, and we need to adapt to climate change. So those messages are are really necessary, and which are closely aligned with our report. So I want to congratulate Dr. Madani and UN Water Conference in 2026, this year, December, and 2028, an excellent opportunity. So we look forward to discussing this further about how we can collaborate. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, likewise, and we have benefited from your work in the past, and we look forward to working with you. Also, congratulations to you for all the good insights that you have produced, and you have certainly contributed to better water management. I think that's important to also talk about the progress we have made. We have made real progress when it comes to the first stage of water development, which means health and sanitation, the WASH element, and we have been very much focused in the world on that part of the agenda, which is really good. It's humanitarian, it's necessary, It's not enough. We could have done a better job, as we have all argued, and we would not meet our targets by the 2030. But we have to celebrate what we have achieved and continue doing better. At the same time, we have to also understand that there is a political economy problem when it comes to managing the big water, the water that is in the hands of farmers. For that, we don't have a real solution, or at least we haven't talked openly about it. We have not reminded countries that if they want to address that issue, they have to start decoupling their economies from water, or reduce the reliance of their economy or the job system on the water system. That is at the macro level. At the micro level, we need to provide finance to them. We need to provide technology and knowledge transfer and to facilitate this transition. If we act together and cooperate with each other, we can make a change. The report says we are in an era of global water bankruptcy. This doesn't mean that every system, every aquifer, every nation, every river basin is bankrupt, but it means that we are seeing more and more systems around the world getting into the bankruptcy mode and failure. Why does that matter? Because as we just learned it in a hard way, Strait of Hormuz closure in the Middle East affected all of us around the world. There are equilibriums in the world that we don't appreciate until they are disrupted. And that's an important thing here. We are connected through the climate system, through trades, through the geopolitics, through migration systems, through the existing peace and security that we have, even though it has a lot of deficiencies. And the moment one of the regions is disrupted, you have a failure, a big failure, in one place, the rest of the world would be affected. So the system warns that the whole global risk landscape has changed, and we need to be careful and very considerate of that.
Hey, thank you very much. Now we invite Dr. Sithuram for any concluding remarks.
Thank you, Professor Madani. We understand that your precious time and also in a different clock zone, you kindly agreed to join us. Our Dean Bambang is actually in another time zone in Melbourne. So on behalf of the Asian Development Bank Institute, allow me to congratulate you once again. Also, thank you for really bringing this vocabulary and the discourse to a much higher level. Bankruptcy is a beautiful way to describe and also is very persuasive and provocative in a way. I remember in Singapore, the chairman of the Singapore's water utility, Thangi Pao, mentioned the use that we are renting water and it's on a lease. So when you give back, you have to give back exactly the way the landlord will expect. In this case, it's Mother Nature. So we use water, but we have to put it back. I think you brought it out even better, that bankruptcy means that you don't know how to give it back. On that note, thank you once again. Now I'll hand it back to our MC, Divasha.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. We will now bring the Q&A session to a close. Thank you very much for all of the engaging and informative discussions. Let us now move on to the second session. Please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Norio Saito, who will share his key messages from the Asian Water Development Outlook 2025.
Yeah, good morning once again, and thank you for giving me an opportunity today to speak about EWDO, Asian Water Development Outlook 2025, which was officially launched in December last year. So ADB has been publishing EWDO since 2007, and this is the 5th edition. And it is a comprehensive assessment of water security in Asia and the Pacific. The 2025 edition provides a crucial assessment of water security across 50 economies in the region, evaluating progress mainly from 2013 to 2025, the last 12 years. So before we turn to the finding, let me briefly explain what EWDO measures. So water security is a holistic, multidimensional concept. And it's not just the water that comes out of a tap. So it's the extent to which people in villages and cities have access to clean water and sanitation. So these are KD1, Key Dimension 1, and KD3. It is also whether countries have enough water for agriculture, industry, and energy, and how effectively water is managed and governed. So this is KD2, economic water security. It's also the health of rivers, wetlands, and groundwater systems, which is KD4, environmental water security. Last but not least, it is the degree to which people are protected from floods, droughts, and storms. So this is KD5, water-related disaster security. So EUDO brings these 5 key dimensions together, with each having a score of 20, to come up with a national water security index for a total score of 100 given to each country. So each KD is given one of the 5 water security steps: model, effective, capable, engaged, and nascent. An economy's national water security rating reflects its most insecure KD. For example, if a country is effective in 2 KDs, capable in 2 KDs, and engaged in 1, its overall rating is still engaged. This approach highlights the areas most in need of attention. EUDO 2025 continues a process of methodological improvement. So this edition strengthens the underlying quantitative approach while integrating deeper qualitative analysis. It draws on publicly available datasets and composite indicators, produce scores by dimension, and for overall national water security. EUDO cautions against over-interpreting single scores, especially in a region as diverse as Asia and the Pacific. So comparisons between countries can often be misleading because data availability, reliability, and coverage vary widely, especially in smaller or more remote economies. Moreover, country size, governance arrangements, and resource endowments, which widely vary across the region, also influence the indicators. A low or high score may reflect these structural features rather than actual water security conditions. For this reason, EUDO 2025 prioritizes tracking change within each country economy rather than making direct international comparisons. This approach promotes a more honest and constructive understanding of progress while helping to align analysis with national realities and policy processes. So together, these design choices make EUDO 2025 not just a snapshot of regional water security, but a tool for understanding where and why change is happening. So what EUDO 2025 reveals is a story of 2 powerful contrasting realities. On one hand, the region has made monumental progress. Water security has improved significantly across the region, and it is driven by political will and countries deliberately targeting their weakest areas first. But now these hard-won gains are at grave risk of reversal due to environmental degradation, increased climate hazards, and a large shortfall in water infrastructure investments. To get this story more clearly, let me walk you through the 6 key findings that together shape these 2 realities. Our key finding 1 is about the remarkable progress. 2.7 billion people, or about 60% of the entire population in the region, have been lifted out of extreme water insecurity just over the past 12 years. This means that people have access to basic water and sanitation, or are safer from floods, or have better access to water for their livelihoods. This success is largely due to countries addressing the weakest water security dimensions first. Rural household water security, key dimension 1, which was the region's weakest area in 2013, has improved substantially. This was driven by improvements in populous countries such as People's Republic of China, India, and Bangladesh. Yet today, 4 billion people in the region continue to live in economies where unreliable water services, degrading ecosystems, and increasing vulnerability to floods remain daily realities. So while the first key finding shows us how far the region has come, the second shows us what could hold it back, financing. So key finding 2 puts this into sharp focus. The investment required to meet the region's water, sanitation, and hygiene or WASH needs by 2040 is estimated at $4 trillion, which translates to $250 billion per year. However, current level of financing meets only about 40%, mostly through the public financing. So this leaves an annual shortfall of over $150 billion. But financing is only one part of the challenge. There is a disruptive challenge, which is the accelerating force of climate change. So key finding 3 makes this clear. Climate and water-related disaster risks are now rising faster than our readiness to respond. So Asia and the Pacific is now one of the most disaster-affected regions in the world, and climate change is intensifying this pressure. We have seen devastating floods in just the last couple of months alone, including those that hit in Indonesia, Sri Lanka, and Thailand. Floods, droughts, and storms are becoming more frequent and more severe, putting lives, livelihoods, and economies at increasing risk. Between 2013 and 2023, the region recorded around 450 such events, including 41% of global flood events. Budget for resilient investments are not only insufficient, but still focus on disaster response and recovery rather than risk reduction and preparedness. Development continues in high-risk areas, leaving vulnerable communities exposed. Adaptation planning and implementation must accelerate to build a resilient future. So another massive threat is the declining health of the region's ecosystems, which is our 4th key finding. In 2013, Asia's biggest water challenge, as I said, was rural water and sanitation access. But 2025, environmental water security is the weakest dimension. 30 economies out of 50 saw their environmental score stagnate or decline. This means that countries have expanded water infrastructure, but often at the expense of the rivers, wetlands, and groundwater systems, which are required to sustain long-term water security. Degraded catchments fail to properly filter and store water. Groundwater is over-extracted. Polluted rivers threaten the public health gains achieved through improved sanitation. So these are just mentioned by this water bankruptcy presentation by Dr. Madani. Plastic pollution is another threat. All of these have dire consequences for communities and economies. Governance and policy frameworks are improving across the region, but implementation and enforcement remain weak. Our key finding 5 is that infrastructure alone does not guarantee health and economic outcomes. Despite major investments in water infrastructure, many systems still underperform. Hygiene improvements are modest, and overall safe water access remains limited due to contamination, weak monitoring, poor maintenance, or low community engagement. Now, as we look across all 5 findings, one factor stands out very clearly. It is governance that ultimately ties all aspects together. It's interesting in the initial poll, many people highlighted this importance of governance. So this brings us to key finding 6, governance deserves much greater attention. EDO 2025 shows that even where investments are strong and policies are well designed, progress ultimately depends on whether governance systems can deliver. Social inclusion has a strong influence over every key dimension of water security. So now let me turn to a snapshot of the trends in each sub-region in Asia and the Pacific. Central West Asia has recorded a 12% rise in its National Water Security Index in the last 12 years, reflecting steady progress in basic services and resilience. Tajikistan stands out as the sub-region's top improver in disaster resilience, driven by strong national systems for flood and storm management and supported by initiatives such as early warnings for all. Yet the region faces mounting pressure as rapid glacial retreat threatens long-term water availability. East Asia is the regional leader across all dimensions, achieving a 42% increase in the score driven by sustained investments and institutional strengthening. Rural wash coverage substantially advanced. China is the biggest improver in water-related disaster security, KD5, among all the economies, supported by extensive flood control infrastructure, high-density rainfall radar networks, and expansion of emergency response systems. The Pacific has achieved a 14% increase in its National Water Security Index, reflecting steady progress despite profound structural challenges. As the most vulnerable region to water-related disaster risk, Pacific Island countries continue to face escalating threats from storms, floods, and sea level rise. Despite these pressures, Tonga stands out for its success in ecosystem protection. Southeast Asia recorded a 14% increase in the total score, yet the region remains the world's largest source of plastic pollution, putting pressure on rivers, coasts, and ecosystems. Lao PDR emerges as the sub-region's top improver, driven by broad progress across multiple dimensions, including economic and urban water security. Cambodia is another strong improver, enhancing urban and disaster security. Lastly, South Asia achieved a 34% increase in the score, making one of the strongest gains. The region has most improved in rural household water security due to improvements in India, Nepal, and Bangladesh. In India, government policies have played a central role. For example, Swachh Bharat or Clean India mission improved rural toilet access. The Jal Jeevan mission is expanding safe and adequate piped water supply coverage in rural areas. So now let's zoom in a little bit more on top improvers. Let me say a few words about the countries I haven't mentioned. So Niue in the Pacific, its improvement is mainly driven by data availability changes, but disaster resilience has boosted. In Mongolia, tariff reforms and infrastructure upgrades boosted urban services, while WASH programs doubled rural access to basic water and sanitation. Sri Lanka demonstrated strong performance in urban water security and water-related disaster security. Nepal succeeded in near total eradication of open defecation, reducing the rate from 35% to less than 1%, contributing to rural water security improvements. So based on these findings, I would like to highlight 4 actions required. Action 1, bridge the investment gap with smarter finance. So it's crucial to mobilize more private capital, and mechanisms such as blended finance and credit enhancement can de-risk private investment. Multilateral development banks, including ADB, can play a critical role to crowd in private and domestic finance. It's equally critical to improve operational efficiency by better utilizing the existing assets and manage water demand more wisely. Action 2, advance policy reforms for inclusivity, efficiency, and sustainability. Regarding inclusivity, the poor and vulnerable are often the last to receive water and sanitation access, but they are often the first to suffer from water-related disasters, and they have very limited coping capacity. So the policy needs to ensure that no one is left behind. In terms of efficiency, there is still a lot of water loss and wastage in agriculture and water supply systems. Addressing this would not only reduce costs, but conserve resources. Regarding sustainability, we have seen cases where the infrastructure built doesn't provide intended benefits over time due to poor operation and maintenance. Cost-reflective tariffs can not only help financial sustainability of the assets, but incentivize better water management. Action 3 is to strengthen governance. Governance is not only about institutions at the top. Trust, participation, and local networks matter. The focus needs to shift from building infrastructure, prioritizing resilient systems that are equitable, efficient, and governed effectively, which enables sustainable service delivery. Action 4 is to protect ecosystems. As I said, environmental water security is now the weakest dimension. More efforts are clearly needed for ecosystem restoration, and integration of nature-based solutions into great infrastructure to enhance resilience, public health, and long-term water security. So we'd like to thank our funding and research partners. ADB leads the ELDO series, but ELDO has always been a joint effort. In this version, we received funding support from the governments of Japan, the Netherlands, and United Kingdom. The universities and research institutes noted here have brought all these important findings to light. So as we look ahead, the future water security in Asia and the Pacific will be shaped by the decisions we make today. So ELDO 2025 has given us the data, insights, and the clarity needed to act with purpose. So with this, let me conclude my presentation, but I hope you're now more interested in ELDO 2025, and I would like to invite you to scan the QR code to learn more. Yeah, let me pause here, and thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saito, for that very insightful presentation. Once again, we encourage participants to engage with our speaker. To ask a question, you may raise your hand during the Q&A, or you may also submit questions through the Q&A feature or the chat box. So now we will start with the Q&A session. Let's start with one of the questions in the chat box. Someone asked, in places facing groundwater depletion and land subsidence, what mix of public investment, regulation, and enforcement has actually worked to shift users away from unsustainable extraction? And what public finance tools are most promising for middle-income countries in Asia?
Should I respond to that question or
Yes,
anyone?
thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, so like MDBs like ADB can provide financing, technical assistance, but also support like a policy enhancements. So when it comes to groundwater abstraction, I think it is really important to improve the policies. And ADB has instruments like technical assistance to support the policies, but we can also provide like a policy-based lending, which is lending based on the accomplishments of the important policy actions. So this way we can influence the advancement of the policies to make the water, more sustainable and water use more sustainable. So that's one way to support it.
Thank you very much. Additionally, there is another question that asks, how can technology be integrated effectively in the water supply chain, inclusion of production, usage, and sanitation to circulate efficiently and wisely for different stakeholders?
I think now there are more and more, better technologies, solutions, technological solutions available. AI is certainly a very promising tool to really enhance the efficient use of water, sustainable use of water. So it's really important for all stakeholders to be aware of what technologies are available, what technologies are suitable to the context of each country and each city, and then integrate those solutions into the investment or into the service delivery systems.
Thank you very much. Another attendee asked about the political participation and political risks that they acknowledge to be very high for implementing infrastructure projects relating to water in Mongolia. And there are a lot of illegal working relations that are expanding on variety ways. Maybe they would like to ask for your insights on how they are able to resolve those legal issues and relations to stop illegal projects. What are the main methods to resolve these issues?
Yeah, so as I said, policy enhancements are necessary, and for the water systems, it's important to involve all the stakeholders to the stage. So we need to listen to all the stakeholders, their perspectives, and through the dialogue, I think we can come up with mutual solutions. And the ADB has some technical assistance tools to really support stakeholder engagement and also discuss the policy dialogue with the government to come up with the better policy measures. And also, as I said in my presentation, good policy has more meaning if it's implemented and enforced properly. So policy enforcement, policy implementation I think that's really more an area that needs greater attention.
Thank you very much. Another question comes that the pattern of water resources is changing. So how should us humans begin to prepare in advance? And how should we replenish these shortages in an alternative way?
Yeah, I think it's really actually in ELDO 2025 for the first time in our methodology, we included climate change multiplier or index to really incorporate the future climate changes into the assessment of water security. So I think proper assessment, proper modeling is really important when we plan future investments because the rainfall patterns are changing, glaciers are melting. So we need to take those into account in coming up with a new plan and also particularly the new investments.
Thank you very much. Additional question is asking about the Central Asian region and how each country there has its own priorities and issues, such as what are indicated in the report, such as insufficient investment and poor governance. So, as a multilateral development bank, what support will ADB provide in the upcoming years in this region, particularly regarding the private sector engagement? What initiatives will the ADB implement to encourage private sector engagement?
Okay, there are a couple of points. I think one there are a couple, yeah, one challenge of the Central West Asian countries is that many countries are suffering from aging infrastructure. Some of the facilities are built during the Soviet time, and those facilities are becoming very inefficient and old. So asset modernization to make the facilities more efficient and effective. So that's really one important aspect that has to be incorporated in that region. In terms of private financing, of course, we have to support the critical part is the credit worthiness of the cities and water utilities. Because if the credit, if those entities become more credit worthy, then private sector may be more interested in providing financing for the investment. So if we look at tariff reforms, more revenue collections, or if it's a local government, property tax collection. So that way the revenue streams need to be enhanced. And also the efficiency of the systems, as I said, the cost reduction, how to make the system more efficient and reduce the cost. So that's also an important aspect to enhance the credit worthiness of the water utilities.
Thank you very much. That was a really insightful Q&A session, which brings us to the end of the Q&A session. We would like once again to thank Dr. Norisaito once again for his time and very insightful presentation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much. We will now proceed with the panel discussion with Dr. Kei Sitaram from ADBI. We are kindly inviting Professor Ishitawari from Japan Water Forum and Ms. Yunjin from the World Water Council to share their insights. To ask a question for the guest, please kindly raise your hand during the Q&A and moderator will activate the unmute feature for you. You may also use the Q&A feature or the chat box to send your questions.
Thank you, Divasha. We have very excellent presentations, one from Professor Madani and from Dr. Saito. So let me get initial reactions, Professor Ishiwatari and Ms. Yunjin Kim, on what are your takeaways. Both have been involved in the water sector for many years, and later we will go to the other participants' questions and have a free discussions. Please go ahead, Professor Ishiwatari first.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. And thank you very much for very informative and interesting presentations. I would like to focus on governance, highlighted as key findings fits in the ALDO report through lens of Japanese historical experience. All people assume that Japan resolved water problems through engineering technology and investment capacity. These were certainly important, but I would like to highlight development of water governance through centuries of conflicts and resolution. When Japan began modernization in the late 19th century, its water resources were, in today's terminology, bankrupt. Farmers had developed river water for paddy irrigation over thousands of years, and by that time, rivers were fully allocated. Severe water shortages occur every few years throughout the country. Conflicts over water were not merely disputes, they were violent. Farmers fought with hoes, sickles, and sometimes firearms. Hundreds were killed in these clashes. The Bakufu, Shogun's military government, prohibited armed conflicts and imposed death sentences on community leaders who led violence. These conflicts, however painful, produced Japanese water governance. Over generations, farmers' communities developed their own rules for allocating water, resolving disputes, and sharing losses during drought. The allocation mechanism that resulted became the foundation of modern Japanese river law. When the government sought water for urban and industrial supply to modernize the country, no allocated water remained in rivers. Infrastructure alone could not resolve this problem. Farmers refused to permit additional water withdrawals. Their position was strong. They had managed these resources for centuries, at times at the cost of their lives. Urban residents, industries, and even modern legislations were, in their eyes, newcomers to their rivers with no establishment claim. New projects required agreements from existing water users. Modernized facilities provided improved irrigation to farmers from newly developed water sources at no cost to them, as a condition of consent. This was not charity, it was the price of legitimacy. This approach is embedded in Japanese river law to this day. The law stipulates that during droughts, water users must consult one another on allocation, respecting each other's rights. Japanese law requires water users to consult one another during drought and adjust their use through mutual agreement. A legal obligation rooted not in principle, but in centuries of hard-won custom. The UMU reports call for a shift from crisis management to bankruptcy management. Japan's experience suggests that such a shift requires governance systems that communities trust. Systems built on negotiations, mutual respect, and shared sacrifice. The Audu report emphasizes governance reform and institutional strengthening as essential. Japan's long history of water conflicts and resolutions offer one concrete example of how these principles have been put into practice. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to further discussions.
Thank you. I was reminded actually the 2003 World Water Forum that was held in Kyoto, Osaka, and Shiga in the Lake Biwa and the Yoda River Basin that time. So it's more than 20 years now, but still these conversations are highly relevant. Let's now move on to Ms. Eugene Kim, please, for your initial reactions. You can also comment on the points that Professor Ishiwatari made.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, first of all. It was a real privilege for me to hear such a compelling and thought-provoking concept that we've discussed so directly, and to engage with a depth of perspective brought by both Dr. Madani and Dr. Saito. So I would like to share a few reflections and the point of feedbacks first. So I really do appreciate very much the perspective that Dr. Madani brought to the discussion with the water bankruptcy, particularly in the framing today's water challenges in a way that captures their structural seriousness in real urgency, that we could say. So I also found Dr. Saito's presentations very valuable in showing how these pressures are already being experienced in the Asian and the Pacific region across agricultural cities, ecosystems, disasters, and an uneven governance capacity. For me, that brings into focus a deeper question whether our prevailing development pathways and institutional arrangements that we really need are sufficiently aligned with increasingly binding hydrological realities, or whether they will rest on the assumptions that are becoming progressively harder to sustain. And that, in my view, is where this discussion becomes very consequential. So what this discussion exposes is that the global water agenda still speaks too often in a language of improvement or development, while the real policy challenges in many places is already one of adjustments, reprioritization, and institutional credibility under constraints. At the same time, one question this concept usually raises for me is whether it might be complemented by a more standardized diagnostic tool that can capture regional and country-specific realities more accurately, as we've seen different distinctions of distinctive features of the Asia Pacific from other. Because water is still governed largely through national and subnational systems, that kind of tool could help situate nationally managed water conditions more clearly within the broader transboundary or integrated system perspective. It also raises for me a broader governance question. If bankruptcy implies not only distress, but also responsibility and restructuring, how might that be understood in the water governance, where responsibility and adjustment authority are often distributed across different national and basin contexts? This matters especially in the Asia and the Pacific. The region combines climate pressures, rapid urbanization, strong dependencies on water and food production, high disaster exposure, as we all know. As a water problem is often in effect broader governance test. So whether institutions can coordinate across sectors, observe different trade-offs, adjust priorities early enough, and do so without losing legitimacy. In that sense, water security is becoming not only a question of resource availability, but increasingly a question of governing capacity under pressure. The question of international cooperation is no longer only how to support better water projects. So it is increasingly how to help countries navigate politically difficult transition under tighter ecological constraints. That also requires a different kind of cooperation, of course, one that is less narrowly sectoral and much more connected to food systems, climate adaptation, land use, urban planning, disaster resilience, and social protections. So I would add one further point from the perspectives of the World Water Forum, since I'm working for the World Water Council, and this is one of the largest platforms that we could gather to discuss about this issue. At the 11th World Water Forum next year in March in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, we have been discussing the value of water as one of our key themes in the thematic process, and as one that is deeply interconnected with the other major themes. In that context, I believe concepts such as water bankruptcy can make a valuable contribution, not simply because they are provocative, but because they challenge us to reconsider how water is valued in the practice, not only in the principle. So too often the value of water is still framed in the conventional terms, as economic inputs, as service to be delivered, or resource to be managed or more efficiently. But this kind of framing pushes the discussion further. So I really would like to invite this further discussion, how these concepts and the different dialogues and the water bankruptcy perspectives could be envisioned. Our another very practical dialogues and also the actions that we're looking for. The future of water governance will depend less on isolated sectoral management and more on the capacity of governing allocation under constraints, set priorities transparently, coordinate across water, food, land, energy, climate, and all these urban systems together, and maintain institutional legitimacy while navigating different transitions. So if I were to put in simply, my takeaway from both presentation is this: the next water agenda will have to focus less on managing water as a sector and more on governing transition under constraints and more deeply understood in the political awareness and the priorities. And the quality of that transition will depend on whether countries and institutions are able to confront limits early, negotiate priorities credibly, and build cooperation before water stress becomes a deeper source of their fragility. Thank you very much, and I also look forward to our further discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Kim. Two very interesting viewpoints, and also you've really shared that the governance is so important, and also you've underlined how to creatively use the water bankruptcy for really understanding and establishing the true value of water. So here it's an honor again to invite Professor Michael Hanneman. I had the distinct pleasure of actually meeting him in person for the first time in February in Singapore, and he's a pioneer of discussing this economic value of water, and he actually gave a seminal lecture. So let me invite him again to share some of his views and reactions to these two presentations and also the comments made by the panelists. Professor Hanneman, over to you.
I very much enjoyed listening to the presentations and the comments. And I've spent a lot of my career developing methods for valuing water. But I think the problem is more complicated than measuring the value of water. So the cost of water, say, to everybody who lives in the Phoenix area, 5 million people, there's some variation, but you can talk about a number that is the cost. You can't talk about a number that is the value, because different people value water in different ways. And so you have a heterogeneity of values. So to compute the overall value of water to a metropolitan area requires a lot of separate calculations, because there are many different people and they value water in different ways. So that's measuring value is more complicated, more heterogeneous than measuring cost. But the other problem is, if you then take a measure of the average value of water to citizens of a metropolis and then argue that they should pay that average, that becomes complicated, precisely because different people value water in different ways. It's a political challenge to get people to pay, in effect, the same number. And so valuation is useful for doing cost-benefit analysis of projects. Valuation is useful for making a case to lenders. It's not of such practical use in actually raising the finance from the water users, precisely because of this tremendous heterogeneity across individuals and organizations. That's the difficulty with value, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Hanneman. We are on clock, so I would like to make a brief summary reaction to all of these. I also had the honor to work on water for many years, since 2000 and 2003, the World Water Forum, and I also had privilege to be the co-author for the first Asian Water Development Outlook, where we highlighted indeed that the problems of water are not to do with the physical scarcity, but more about governance. But rhetorics and restating the facts do not take us too far. I think today's lectures about the bankruptcy is not only provocative, it is also, I think, giving an alarming signal to us. And as Professor Hanneman mentioned, we can estimate the cost, but we are divided or we don't have a consensus on the true value. But we all know the value of life, and water is for life, or water is life. And I think now the connection is, as Professor Ishwatari nicely brought together, is the cultural and the traditional narratives. Because we have been living with water, or rather, because of water, we have civilization. So there's a civilizational value and practices which have been maybe undermined or maybe disregarded or not respected. And I think we're kind of asked to revisit them, and time has come with the global understanding of various situations. So vulnerabilities make us kind of go back to history, but not really like going back in time, but kind of revisiting the true meanings of these. And that is what civilizations have learned. And we hope that today's discussions really bring back these three aspects that we have discussed: bankruptcy, certainly, and the Asian Water Development Outlooks showing the index. And finally, the panel discussion where all three distinguished panelists made comments. Now, in the interest of time, let me hand it back to Divasha and Samantha to wrap up. And my thanks to both of them for really putting this together. Back to you, Divasha.
Thank you very much to Dr. Sitaram and all participants for such an engaging session. We also thank all of the guests for their questions. Rest assured that we will forward the questions in the chat box to today's panelists and speakers, and their responses will be shared with you later. This now brings us to the end of today's webinar. As we conclude, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to all our speakers, presenters, and attendees for joining us today. We truly appreciate your time and participation and valuable contribution to this discussion. We hope to stay connected with you and look forward to welcoming you again at future ADBI events. Before we close, please do not forget to complete the post-event survey. You may scan the QR code on the screen or click on the link shared in the chat box. Your feedback will be extremely valuable in helping us improve our future events and capacity building activities. We would also like to take this opportunity to share that ADBI has been actively engaged on work on water and sanitation, including its collaboration with the Gates Foundation. Together, ADBI and the Gates Foundation conduct capacity building and research activities focused on advancing sanitation service delivery, non-sewered sanitation, and the sanitation value chain. Thank you very much once again for joining us today. Goodbye and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.